Welcome to the AI Talk Show, where we discuss the news, share insights, bring guests from the industry, take questions, and involve you in the conversation. AI is having an impact on our businesses, our lives, our society, and everything around us. As leaders in the industry, it's our responsibility to jump in and take part in the discussion. So let's start the conversation. I'm your host, Asha Saxena, CEO of Women Leaders in Data and AI. We call it WILDA. In today's episode, we will discuss AI and biases. AI has the potential to deliver tremendous opportunity, value to business, and overall economy, but it's proving to be problematic, especially when it comes to accuracy of representing the entire population. The concern around AI bias has risen nearly as quickly as the adoption of AI itself, and for good reason. In tech industry, conversations around building trust on AI is often a point of interest for developers, sales team, marketing team, and also HR. Some tech companies like IBM and many others are building tools specifically to counter biases in AI applications, including Watson OpenScale. What I really like about that is that it's an enterprise-grade environment for AI application that gives enterprises visibility into how AI is being built and used. I also like that OpenScale is open by design. It can detect and mitigate biases. It can help explain AI outcome and give insight into the health of the AI systems. And it becomes really important as AI developers, designers, that we have these tools to our access. There's also AI Fairness 360, underrepresentation of data sets and misinterpretation of the data that can lead to major flaws and biases that are critical for decision-making in many industries. It's important because these flaws and biases might not be easy to detect without the right tool. So I like the fact that AI Fairness 360 is an open source library that can help detect and remove biases in machine learning models and data sets. It has a Python package that includes comprehensive sets of metrics for data sets, models to test the biases, explanation for the metrics, and algorithm to mitigate bias in data set and models. But they say when you can get the right tool, but if you don't have the right people working on the right tool, that could be an issue. To discuss this important topic, I have my dear friend and a thought leader in the industry, Nancy Morgan, who has served previously as U.S. Intelligence Community Chief Data Officer and National Security Executive. So Nancy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Asha. Great to be here with you, and such important topics for all of us to talk about and engage on.
You know, Nancy, first of all, I have to mention that it was a treat to be with you in London at the AI Summit, where I felt like I was a child in the candy store because all the tools that were out there and the demos I was walking around the booth to booth, seeing what possibility that can be. and what awaits us as leaders to be able to have access to these technology was incredible. I got to play with not only the tools, but have these conversation about how we can use these tools in our day-to-day life. But the real issue is that we can really get the tools, but we might not be able to have the right team who can use these tools effectively. So let's start, before we start the real conversation about who we need to have on the table or who we need to really have using these tools to make sure that there is fairness and we are being ethically and responsible around use of AI. Let's talk a little bit about our trip to London. We got a chance to launch Women Leaders in Data and AI, WILDA, globally now, starting with our Europe chapter, which was during the week of June 16th. But also, we got to really talk about important topic like biases in AI. And you and I were on quite a few panels discussing this important topic. What was your takeaway? What was your insight as you were participating on the panels, but also listening and having the conversation around this topic?
Oh, Asha, there was such great energy with everyone. There was lots of engagement in AI from every perspective. Before I jump in a little bit more on remarks, I have to give a disclaimer as a retired U.S. government executive that the views expressed are my own, do not imply endorsement by any particular U.S. government agency, and not the Office of the Director of National Intelligence or the Central Intelligence Agency. But let's get back to it. London was so energizing. So much engagement on every perspective, not just generative AI, but all of the flavors of AI. Really getting to see so many people engaging on the possibilities and the potential, and also thinking about those guardrails that I think we'll talk about in a few minutes. But from my standpoint, I was also really excited to see how much partnership was going on between the public sector, the private sector, academia, non-government organizations. I haven't seen that kind of direct engagement and really willingness to work together to define our future in 30 plus years of government experience. So that was really exciting to see. And I think that's something we can talk a little bit more about today.
Nancy, I was listening to a lot of government and federal organizations were there at the conference and were talking about what they're doing in EU and UK about putting the guardrails. And I think it's such an important topic, and the kind of attention we are getting for this topic is, I think, very encouraging. For me, I think just looking at the tools was fun, but also realizing that these tools are only tools. If we don't have the right team in place to use these tools, it could be a problem. So when you talk about organizations to really bring together or build their teams to run programs or develop technologies, why do you think, or what do you think that needs to be done to make sure that we have the diverse teams to be successful for organizations and also for the leaders, and who needs to be at the table?
Thank you, Asha. This is a really important topic from my standpoint. We've got to have diversity of thought, diversity of perspective, as well as diverse teams actually defining and building the capabilities. These teams need to represent our world, which means they need to be diverse and inclusive. We have to have teams that have diverse points of view and have active and valued members who have varied life and world experiences, who come at problems from different optics, different physical characteristics, different cultural considerations. All of these things need to be built in from the get-go and considered. And it's important that we have people, let's use that line from the play Hamilton, to be at the table during the conceptualization, the design, the development, the testing, the deployment, and then how's it going with the capabilities once they get into production? What are the reactions? What are people seeing? Is there bias creeping in? Is there something that needs to be adjusted or tweaked? This is not a once and done proposition. This is an ongoing responsibility on all of this. So I think we have to look at our talent pipelines as well as we talk about this. What are we doing to diversify those talent pipelines? And then not just get people in the door, but keep them there. One of the things I'm really concerned about is I think we're doing a better job in certain organizations more actively recruiting more diverse teams. Can we retain those teams over the years in the workforce and keep their brilliant perspectives and keep their wisdom as part of the teams.
Such a great point because, yeah, recruiting is one thing, but also retaining is another thing. And in Wilda, we do that where we talk to the organization, we talk about why it is so important to retain the team which you've hired, because if they're not having the job satisfaction or they don't feel that there's enough role models, I think that's why it's such an important mission, which I think we all stand for in Wilda, is to make sure that there's enough women at the senior level who can be the role model so that there are enough pipeline who are getting understanding and mentoring to be able to have that aspiration of being able to climb the ladder and be at the table. I think it's important to be at the table, and so important because as we build these algorithms are going to exponentially enhance our biases, exponentially show what we are really believing. So what we believe today is going to have an impact tomorrow on whatever we build as creator, programmers, developers, designers, architects. It reminds me of a couple of stories. The first one, which I think we all know about, the Amazon built a recruiting engine AI algorithm, and the algorithm went on and looked at all the engineers and looked at the resumes and found that there were mostly male engineers. So really, when they went out hunting for the right people, they only picked male resumes and rejected the female resumes, and which is a shame because that's what the representation showed. And so the Amazon story is a great story because I think a lot of people know about that story and the kind of biases that can replicate and enhance the human biases. And it becomes really critical that we hire the people, as you said. Another story which I love is that one of the female leaders I was talking to, and she was sharing that one of the data scientists in her group, she was supposed to work in pharmaceutical drug development, and she was looking at the cardiac drug development process. And the data set she got was predominantly male data set. And so having very little female data sets, she went back and said, I want to really go out and get external data set to make sure there's enough representation and fair representation. And at the end, the result was different. And so she came back and said, because from what the result was from the previous old data set to the new data set, when she went out and got the equal gender data set, the results were different. And of course, the development of drug development was enhanced. And her study was actually published on their website because there was somebody in their team who could identify that. And that only can happen when you are close to that issue. You can actually see differently than everybody else on the table. So I would say the next question would be really, what is the responsibility as leaders to avoid biases in AI? New hire, compensation, what can they do to make sure that and support the female leaders to make sure that they're doing the right thing?
Thank you, Asha. So I think leaders have to insist on equitability in every dimension, in the development and in the outcomes, in the teams that we're bringing to the table, and the teams that we keep at the table. It's that responsibility to ensure trusted, ethical development and use of data and analytics. And as a CDO, it's important to me that we talk about not just looking at historical data and fine-tuning our data and fine-tuning our models and analytics, keeping them current as we learn more, as we get smarter, continuing to refresh that. So leaders have a responsibility to ensure that teams are properly curating the data. And there's an accountability aspect that I don't think we talk about enough. How do we ensure as leaders that there are enough resources for the governance processes? And while the governance process might not be the exciting part of doing it, it's our responsibility to do it right. So how do we ensure there are enough resources for testing, the authoritative sources of data, the model management, preventing model drift? I think those are some of our newer terms, in the AI space. So how do we address scope creep and model drift? If scope changes, there are some responsibilities to reassess. If you're going to bring in data that now has a lot of personally identifiable information or personal health information, you've got to reassess. You might need to put some more guardrails up with that analytic and that data. How can you anonymize data but still get the results you need? These are some of the kinds of responsibilities that need to be addressed. And I think one of the themes we like to talk about, and we've used this in government circles for years, is what I call can we, should we analysis. Just because we can do something, should we do that? And so how do we think that through? I think that's an important part of leadership responsibilities. And with that, of course, we've been talking about ethics. Of course, we've been talking about privacy. What are the considerations? Leaders have a responsibility to drive that through and help make that awareness and sensitivity at every level of the organization. So in some cases, when people are experimenting with things, not just rush to market to do it at enterprise scale. And this is where I'm probably a little more cautious on the timeline, but I think it's my 30 plus years of government experience that do this for me, that says, how do we do the risk assessment to understand the potential outcomes and the implications? How do we think that through? Take a little more time, but also understand what's the risk of not taking action or not doing the experiment. And so sometimes you might drive pretty fast, and other times we might take a more cautious and calculated approach to how we do this. And from government circles, 3 techniques I would share are things like tabletop exercises, gaming and simulation scenarios, and red team concepts. Purposely have someone coming, trying to do sort of penetration testing or asking the hard questions or coming at it from a different scenario and see how those work for you.
You know, I love what you said about can do, should you. And I think that really brings to the next point, is that should we, and what should we be thinking about as we are building. And I think a lot of people's heart is in the right place, and they want to know what should be the regulation. I mean, recently Joe Biden, president, invited the leaders in the industry to be able to have this discussion about what should be the guardrails and what's fair to make the world responsible and ethical use of AI. And so the discussions are happening. We all are talking about what should be the guardrails. And we have countries around the world who are really focusing on what should be the regulation. Everybody agrees that AI is here for good, but they also worry about the harm it can cause. So a lot of people are worried about what it could do, which could be hurtful or harmful. So what should leaders be thinking about? What should be the discussion around putting the guardrails around being a responsible and ethical world, where we can make sure that there's policies and regulations, and we can keep an eye on that? What is available, and what can you recommend?
So this is a really rapidly emerging space. If I look at what's happened just in the last 6 to 12 months, it's an amazing amount of content that is coming out. The US started with the AI Bill of Rights, and then the National Institute of Science and Standards and Technology has issued the AI, let's see, I've got the AI Risk Management Framework, and I think we can share links with our listeners on that. They've created a national AI research and development strategic plan, and this is just what the US is doing. And then just this week, they announced that they're establishing a new public working group to help look at the impact and what should the policy frameworks be for the use of AI. So there's an opportunity for the public to engage, private sector, academia, as I said before, really important to have all of these optics at the table. But for global organizations, it's not just the US. The EU just signed the AI Act while we were in London at the AI Summit. The UK published their pro-innovation approach to AI regulation in March, their policy paper. Each country's got acts and activities going on. There are privacy frameworks coming out in multiple organizations around the world. OECD has their AI principles, and so on. So what organizations have to start doing is looking at these artifacts as they're coming out and figuring out which ones apply. Where are you doing business? Where is your data coming from? Where is your data being held? I think there's a really interesting issues on data sovereignty that still have to be worked through. From a national security standpoint, can't help myself, again, coming from the government and intelligence optic, it's really important to understand the implications for adversarial AI and the risks of poison data. While I don't like to think about that side of the world, that is the world we live in. It is a complicated world, and there are people trying to cause harm. Think about the rise in cyber attacks and ransomware attacks. So there's really an important intersection in your organization's digital C-suite, as we like to call it, among your chief data officers, your chief information officers, your chief information security officers, and now I would add your chief AI officers if that's not dual-hatted with the CDO. This digital C-suite really has to work together to help think through the implications for the organization. So many things evolving so fast that we all have to try and keep up with.
Nancy, so true. As you talk about biases, there are data biases as we talk about and think about, but there's also societal biases, the biases that are already exist in our society. And there are blind spots, right? Certain expectations we are thinking about and we forget, or as you said, blind spots for us. So really thinking about how we are using data, how we are engaging with our audience, and how we're thinking about doing the problem solving becomes really critical. It's important to get the right tools so that you can have the support of the tool, because technology is really here for us to help and guide us. As we close our session, what would you say would be the biggest takeaway for our audience?
I think I have two, because you know me, Aisha, I always like more. One is you've got to get involved. You've got to experiment with some of these technologies. Do it safely. Don't do this necessarily. Don't do this with your confidential and proprietary data, but you've personally got to start working with these tools so you understand what they're all about. And there are people and organizations that can help guide you and give you a start on it. So I think that's part of it. But the second thing for me, as I said in the beginning, is these partnerships. You can't do it alone. You have to think about who else you need to work with to make sure you're successful. So from a government optic, it's the public sector, it's the private sector, academia, and NGOs. Then doing that stakeholder analysis to think about the roles in your organization. And as a CDO, for me, it's thinking about your ecosystem and your data pipeline. Just like your supply chain pipeline, now you've got to think about your ecosystem and your data pipeline.
I love the partnership, Nancy. I think no one can do it alone. Having the right partnership and really getting engaged and being conscious and being responsible becomes really critical at this stage. I also say that algorithms are like children. What you teach them, they repeat. So make sure that you're conscious about what you're teaching these algorithms, how you're engaging with the algorithms, and how you're reinforcing with these algorithms. You have to become a little more conscious about the biases. You have to become more inclusive in this day and age, and you have to make sure that the AI you're building is more engaging and fair and effective. Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to bringing more thought-provoking discussions, cutting-edge news, and expert insights in our next episode. Please go to LinkedIn to subscribe and follow as well. Check out the links and resources in the show notes. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the show, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a review. And get engaged, ask questions, and if you're interested to coming on the show, please send me a note. That's all for the episode. I'm your host, Asha Saxena. This is the AI Talk Show with Asha Saxena. See you next time.